My earliest memories are marred by a subtle stab of comparison, not so obvious as to leave noticeable scars, but painful enough to leave me with an eternal feeling of dissatisfaction with myself. An eternal feeling that I will always miss something. Why can't you be more sociable like your sister? Mom shook her head as I, an 8-year-old girl, sat in my corner, clutching a battered book, the pages of which have long become more dear to me than the voices of the people around me, while Kiera, just 2 years younger than me, was already entertaining the guests with might and main, retelling scenes from her favorite movies in a theatrical voice and flawlessly copying the intonations of the characters. I was silent, lowering my eyes to the pages, pretending that I did not hear my mother's disappointment, but something inside me was painfully shrinking. Felisa, dear, why don't you join the conversation? Dad tried to make his voice softer, but I heard something in it that cut sharper than any reproach, not a request, but rather a statement of the fact that I had again failed to meet their expectations. Meanwhile, Kiera was already perched on his lap, winking at the guests and making them laugh with her latest ridiculous joke, as if every sound of her voice was woven from the sunniest happiness. Favoritism in our family was not a small thing, an accident, or something that could be attributed to the whims of our parents' moods. It permeated every moment of our childhood. Every small detail that seemed insignificant, but formed a pattern in which it was clearly visible. One of us is the center of the universe, and the other is only her muted, blurred background. When Kiera announced that she wanted to study ballet, they immediately bought her a brand new pink swimsuit, a tutu made of the lightest organza and the most expensive point shoes. A year later, when I timidly asked if I could try something new too, my mother just sighed wearily, muttering something about the budget, and a week later handed me a worn flute she bought on eBay. Music is wonderful, Felisa, she said, stroking my head. You can learn to play by yourself, just practice. I clutched the instrument in my hands, trying to smile, but I knew that no one would take me to class. No one would come to watch me play, no one would admire my success, as they admired every graceful movement of Kiera. This happened over and over again, especially vividly in those moments when the holidays were coming, the days when parents' attention was manifested through gifts and the surprises. When I was 12, I was hoping to get a new laptop to help me with my studies, deepen my knowledge, maybe even start writing, but instead I found myself holding a pair of sweaters, several books, and a vague explanation that these were also necessary things. Kiera, despite the fact that she was only 10, got an iPhone because, as her mother explained, her friends' friends have been using phones for a long time. She needs to be in touch. He was silent, looking at the sparkling screen in her hands, and did not understand why my needs were always secondary. The only person who seemed to see me was Grandma Marta. Every summer, when my parents went on family trips with Kiera, I stayed with her in her small but cozy house. They're leaving me behind again, I muttered one day as I watched them load their suitcases into the car, my stomach churning with resentment. Grandma hugged me to her, warmly and tightly, like no one else. Their loss? Oni, she said, smiling. You and I are going to have our own adventure. And she really made these months special. We baked her famous apple pie. She told me stories about her childhood, showed me yellowed letters, and read with me in the evenings. But nothing could change the fact that I remained a shadow in my family. One evening when I was 15, I overheard my parents talking. He just went into the kitchen to get some water, but I froze at the door when I heard them discussing the future. We need to start thinking about college funds, Dad said. We can only afford to pay for the education of one of them, Mom replied calmly. Kiera shows great promise in the theater circle, she continued, as if this were something indisputable. She can really succeed. What about Felisa? Dad asked, but there wasn't the fire in his voice that he showed when it came to Kiera. Felisa is smart, Mom waved her off. She figures something out. Maybe she'll get a scholarship. I stood there, clutching the glass in my hands, and felt their words penetrate deeper into me by the second, changing something in me. That evening, I made a decision. If they are not ready to invest in my future, I will do it myself. Since then, I have thrown myself into all possible academic activities, science fairs, discussion clubs, mathematical competitions. I participated in everything where I could get a chance to prove my worth, to find a place for myself in the sun. Meanwhile, Kiera went on dates, had fun, and lived as if her world was created solely for pleasure. Felisa, you're just jealous that your sister has a social life, Mom said easily when I tried to say something about the difference in our relationship. I silently went to my room, clutching academic medals in my hands, as if they were proof that I was worth something after all. And when it came time to go to university, I finally proved it. I received a full scholarship to study at a state university, at the School of Business Management. The day I received the letter of enrollment, I was filled with excitement and pride, and I ran to show it to my parents, hoping to see at least for a brief moment the approval in their eyes, the recognition of my efforts, the pride they so often felt for Kiera. But when I ran into the living room, I found a completely different scene. My mother, with a beaming face, was helping Kiera choose an outfit for her next date, and my father, smiling, was telling me which restaurants in the city center were worth visiting, as if this was the most important event in the family. I clutched the letter in my hands, feeling the joy inside me fade instantly, disappearing into the familiar feeling of invisibility. Mom, Dad, I started, but Kiera interrupted me, clapping her hands. How do you like this dress? Do you think he'll like it? What is it? She asked, twirling in front of the mirror, and Mom immediately nodded, smiling admiringly. I swallowed, feeling the lump in my throat grow unbearably heavy. Listen to me for once, I managed, but at the same moment, my mother, without taking her eyes off Kiera, asked absently, "What did you want, One?" I looked at them and realized that there was no point in talking. They didn't notice me, they didn't see my joy, they didn't want to listen. I turned around and left, clutching the letter tighter in my hands, making a silent promise to myself that from now on my life would depend only on me. Moving to a dormitory was for me the first real breath of fresh air, something like a long-awaited release after many years spent in the shadow of someone else's glow. There I met Sarah, a girl who from the very first days became the sister I always dreamed of. She didn't just listen, she really heard me, celebrated my achievements, supported me in difficult moments, and was proud of my successes in a way my family had never done. Separation from Mom did not bring me loneliness. On the contrary, it gave me a feeling of lightness, freedom, and the opportunity to finally be myself. The rare phone calls came down to the same scenario. My mother enthusiastically talked about Kiera, her many hobbies, dates, and the new popularity. Imagine, Kiera is now dating the captain of the football team. She shouted into the phone, not even bothering to ask how my classes were going. Everyone just adores her. Are you seeing anyone, Felisa? I automatically replied that I was focused on my studies, quickly ended the conversation and exhaled with relief, turning off the phone. The truth was, I didn't need their approval anymore. I was doing well, my professors appreciated my work, and I had real friends who saw me as more than just Kiera's sister. But it all collapsed in one moment. In the third year, during one of the rare family calls, Mom suddenly, almost casually, dropped words that hit me harder than any of her previous indifference. "Oh, by the way, Kiera has enrolled in one of the most prestigious universities. We are so proud. We found her a wonderful faculty, near the campus. You should have seen the view from the window. Oh, yes, your father and I, of course, fully cover the costs. We want her to focus on her studies without worrying about money." I was sitting in my small dorm room, clutching my phone, holding back tears of anger. The same parents who had easily told me that they couldn't afford to pay for my college now invested all their money in Kiera's education without hesitation, as if it were a matter of course. But I didn't let that pain destroy me, I turned it into determination. I graduated from the university with honors, having won a place in one of the leading consulting firms in the city, and after 2 years of hard work, I was promoted to senior consultant. The night my promotion was announced, my colleagues insisted on celebrating at a trendy downtown bar. I didn't particularly like parties like this, but something inside me told me that this time I should agree. That's where I met Carlos. He was confident, charming, successful, but most importantly, he was really interested in me, my career, my goals, my achievements. We exchanged numbers and soon started dating. Carlos was the first person who made me feel important, meaningful, and loved in a way I've never felt around my own family. But as soon as my life began to find stability and harmony, Kiera burst into it again. The invitation to her wedding came unexpectedly. She was getting married to Fonza Contia, a famous real estate developer whom she had met at university. He hesitated for a long time, almost decided not to go, but Carlos convinced me. Felisa, if you don't go, it will look like you're avoiding her. You're strong. Don't let her control your emotions. He reluctantly agreed. And, as expected, Kiera's wedding turned out to be too lavish, too loud, too Kiera. She floated in her designer dress like a queen, enjoying everyone's attention. I always knew I'd get married first, she told me with a smile when it was time for the obligatory sister photo. He restrained my irritation, put on a polite smile and took a sip of champagne. I mean, you've always been so focused on your career and all that. But don't worry, maybe someday you'll find someone too. At that moment, I realized that in Kiera's eyes, I would forever remain the one who was at most, who was not enough. But it didn't matter now. I built my life on my own terms. I had a good job, a loving man, and the confidence that I didn't need anyone's approval. A year after Kiera's wedding, Carlos and I were already living together in a cozy apartment in the city center. One evening, when we were cooking dinner, he suddenly froze, then got down on one knee right in our tiny kitchen and took out a ring. My heart started beating faster, and before he could ask a question, I already knew the answer. Yes, he exclaimed, practically jumping into his arms. The ring wasn't as flashy as Kiera's huge diamond, but it fit me perfectly. Elegant and restrained, it reflected everything I was and wanted to be, a man who chose his own destiny, not someone else's reflection. When I called my parents to share the news, my mom replied predictably sluggishly, "Oh, how sweet that is, Anne. We should get to know him properly. Bring him to us this weekend." The meeting turned out to be exactly as uncomfortable as I expected. Tiara came uninvited, of course, in a designer outfit that probably cost more than Carlos and I rent an apartment every month. "So you finally found someone who's willing to marry you," she said, grinning the same condescending smile that has accompanied me all my life. "I was already beginning to worry that you would be left alone with your spreadsheets and presentations." Carlos squeezed my hand under the table, helping me stay calm. To my surprise, Mom and Dad seemed to warm up to him during dinner. They laughed at his stories, asked questions about his work, and by the end of the evening, Mom suddenly announced, "We should have an engagement party. We figure it out. It's the least we can do, considering we couldn't contribute to your education." The casual manner in which she mentioned their financial favoritism made me seethe, but Carlos seemed so enthusiastic about the idea that I agreed. 2 months later, we went back to my parents' house for a party. They did a really good job on the decoration, and when I saw all our relatives gathered to celebrate us, I thought maybe things were changing. Kiera came alone, explaining that Fonz was away on business. She continued to sarcastically comment on everything around me, my dress, which, according to her, looked budget-friendly, our choice of wedding planner, to whom she could offer the best specialist. The party was in full swing when I realized that I hadn't seen Carlos for a long time. "Has anyone seen my fiancé?" he asked, but everyone was too busy talking and drinking to pay attention. Something was wrong. He started searching the house, eventually going upstairs. As I approached my old bedroom, I heard sounds that made my stomach clench. My heart was pounding and my hands were shaking as I reached for the door handle. The door creaked open. Here they are, Carlos and Kiera, tangled in the sheets of my childhood bed. "Felisa, bite, I can explain." Carlos hurriedly pulled on his clothes, his face flushed either from shame or from exertion, I couldn't tell. Kiera didn't even bother to cover herself. She just lay there, leaning on her elbow, with that smug smile I've known all my life. "Oh, Felisa," she purred, idly running her hand through her tangled hair. Carlos just realized what I knew from the beginning. I'm the best sister. You always have been and always will be. My hands were shaking so much that I had to lean against the door frame. For 28 years, I was the second most important. Always the second one. He opened my mouth to scream, to finally release decades of pain and rage. But before I could, Mom and Dad burst into the room, obviously hearing the commotion. Mom gasped and covered her mouth with her hands, and then burst into tears. Felisa, Annie, please. She grabbed my hand, her voice trembling. You can't tell anyone about this. He stared at her in disbelief. What? Think about your sister, Dad interjected. His face was serious, and there was concern in his eyes, but not for me. If Fons finds out about this, he'll divorce her. That is a prenuptial agreement. She won't get a dime. Please, Felisa, think about what this will do to the family. Mom exclaimed, sobbing. I blinked, trying to process their words. Even now, even after I found my fiancé in bed with my married sister, their only concern was to protect Kiera. Please, baby, I'm so sorry. Carlos was fully dressed, now reaching for me, his face contorted with remorse. It was a mistake. He took a step towards me, and without thinking, I pulled my hand out of his grasp. Without a word, I turned around and went downstairs, where the guests were still laughing, clinking glasses. Music was playing, and there was that festive atmosphere that now seemed somehow alien and distant to me, as if it existed in a parallel reality that had nothing to do with me. The aroma of baked meat, spicy sauces, and the sweet champagne was in the air, but everything inside me had already burned down. Attention, please. My voice rang out, and it sounded firm, distinct, although everything inside me was trembling, and my heart was thudding somewhere in my throat. The guests turned to me, frozen, and someone even turned off the music, and in the silence that followed, I could clearly hear the glass rattling in someone's hand. I have something to announce. There will be no wedding. There was complete silence in the hall. Simeone gasped, someone whispered. My mother's gaze darted to me in horror. My father frowned, but I no longer paid attention to them or to how someone's lips were silently forming questions. I'm very sorry that this may cause inconvenience to those who came here today, I continued, taking a step forward and feeling dozens of amazed stares follow me. Please enjoy the food, drink champagne, have fun if you want, but I need to leave. Ignoring the screams that rang out, I turned on my heel and walked confidently towards the exit. I could feel my mother's burning gaze on me, and I could see my father's confused face in the corner of my eye. But the real pain came when I heard Carlos's voice, full of despair and pleading. Felisa, bite. I didn't turn around. For God's sake, Felisa, don't take the trash out of the hut. But nothing stopped me anymore. He stepped out into the night, slamming the door behind me. The road almost foggy, my thoughts were confused, but one thing I knew for sure, I wasn't going back. As soon as I got into the apartment, it was like I went into automatic mode. I took out of the closet the cardboard boxes that Carlos and I had left behind to move into a new life, and now I used them to collect his clothes, books, his precious golf clubs, everything that reminded me of him, that once filled our house and created the illusion of happiness. An hour later, all his belongings were packed in the cab, and 20 minutes later, in the nearest rented warehouse. He sent Carlos a text with the address and access code, and then, without regret, I blocked his number, email, and all his social media accounts. My phone vibrated with a lot of new messages, from my parents, from my family, from Kiera, but I didn't read them. Then I deleted my mother's and the father's contacts. Cheers. Everyone who has ever made me feel like I'm not good enough. He was sitting in the dark of my apartment, surrounded by silence, feeling not an emptiness in my chest, but something strange, lightness. For the first time in many years, I was breathing deeply. Life brings surprises when you least expect them. 3 years later, in a small coffee shop in the city center, I literally bumped into him. Old coffee splashed out of my glass right onto his snow-white shirt, and I froze, stunned, preparing for an irritated reaction. But instead I heard cheerful laughter. I think now I have a reason to buy you a new coffee, he said, looking at me with a warm smile. He wanted to refuse. After Carlos, I vowed not to enter into a relationship, completely immersed in my work. But there was something different about him. Maybe it was his sincerity, his calmness, or the lack of that pompous confidence that my ex-fiancé possessed. I promise I'm not a serial killer, he joked. noticing my confusion. Just a clumsy architect who would like to replace your coffee and maybe get your room. Just coffee, I replied, trying to stay on the defensive. But this coffee turned into dinner. Dinner is for new meetings. He didn't rush me, he didn't insist, he didn't push me. He was just there. 2 years later, he proposed on a quiet evening at our house, without crowds of spectators and expensive restaurants. It's just us, a box of Chinese food and a simple but beautiful ring. He said yes without a single doubt. Then soon as the parents, Tom and Linda, wanted to arrange a beautiful wedding for us. At first, I wanted to refuse. The memories of the past were still too vivid, but they were so genuinely happy that I was becoming part of their family that I gave up. Linda even took my hand and took me to the store to buy a wedding dress. He invited Grandma Mata, the only person who has always been on my side. Then aunts, uncles, cousins, those who loved me, who were happy for me, those who never put me in second place. But the issue of my parents loomed after weeks of internal arguments. He finally picked up the phone. "Mom," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Felice." There was genuine shock mixed with joy in her voice. "We found out about your engagement from Aunt Sarah. I'm calling to invite you and Dad to the wedding." I interrupted her before I could change my mind. Oh, Annie, we would love to come. Have you sent the invitation yet?" There was a hint of impatience in her voice. "Kiera and the Fawns, you know, your sister would like to be there." "No," I said firmly, clutching the phone in my palm. "And I won't invite her. She lost that right when she slept with my fiancé at my engagement party. When she was married." He could have added so much more about how she spent her whole life taking away everything that mattered to me, about how they always chose her, ignoring me, but I decided not to waste a second more on it. He expected the usual protests, excuses, and attempts to make amends for me, but there was dead silence on the other end of the line. "The wedding is next month," I continued, trying to keep my voice neutral. "I will send you the details by email." There was silence on the phone for a few seconds, then Mom sighed, as if she were carrying an exorbitant burden. "Okay, Annie," she said, but there wasn't a drop of joy in her voice, just a muffled disappointment, as if I had failed to meet some invisible expectations again. He hung up without saying goodbye and felt relieved. My wedding day started off perfectly. The sun's rays penetrated through the delicate branches of the trees, creating delicate patterns on the snow-white tablecloths hung on the tables. The air was filled with the aromas of fresh flowers and the light clink of crystal glasses. The Sanson family thought through every detail with the care and love, and for the first time in my life, I felt like I was surrounded by those who were really happy for me. I stood in front of the mirror, looking at myself in a dazzling white dress, and for the first time in a long time I saw happiness in my own eyes, not anxiety. But this perfect moment burst like a soap bubble when I entered the reception hall. There, in the middle of the crowd, next to my parents, she was Kera. In a tight-fitting dress that accentuated that obviously pregnant belly, she looked as if she was one of the main culprits of the celebration. And, of course, she had that smug smile that I remembered from the night I found her with Carlos in my childhood bedroom. But that wasn't the worst part. She winked at me. She winked, as if we were sharing some dirty joke, as if what she had done was something insignificant. My gaze darted to the side, and I saw Fons, her husband, standing next to her. He didn't seem to notice anything unusual. I went straight to my parents, feeling my hands clench into fists. "What's she doing here?" he said, looking straight into my mother's eyes. "Felisa," she began in that patronizing tone I knew all too well. "You're being ridiculous. Kiera is your sister. Of course she needs to be at your wedding. This accident happened many years ago. It's time to move on and forgive." Her words made my vision go dark. I wanted to scream, to remind her that this accident had ruined my relationship, but at that moment I felt Sensong's hand find mine and gently squeeze. His touch brought me to my senses. It was our day, and I'm not going to let them ruin it. I took a deep breath and turned around, walking away. The ceremony went smoothly, and soon we were in the banquet hall. Everything was going well until the toast started. My mother stood up first, holding a glass of champagne, and looked around the guests with a smile. "I'm so happy that my second daughter is finally found her mate," she began, and my heart sank. "Alto, of course. Chiara was the first at the altar, wasn't she?" He felt the muscles in my face tighten, but he didn't say anything. "You two have always been so close," she continued. "Shared everything." She talked all the time about Chiara, about her wedding, about her husband, about her pregnancy, as if my existence at this celebration was secondary, just another event in a long series of celebrations dedicated to my sister. He squeezed the glass so hard that the tunnel thought it would crack. Linda, Sanson's mom, noticed this and carried my knee sympathetically. But the worst part was what happened next. Chiara stood up. "Your bridesmaid wants to say a few words," she announced, ignoring the fact that I hadn't asked her to speak. She adjusted her dress, emphasizing her pregnant belly, and then said, "Felisa has always respected me, and I have always taken care of her. In fact, a few years ago, I actually saved her from making a huge mistake." She paused dramatically, giving me a knowing look. She owes me. Everything I did was for her own good. The inn was filled with nervous laughter and cheers, but to Luna cold air was the blood rushing in my ears. She actually stood here at my wedding, which I didn't invite her to, and boasted without the slightest shame that she had slept with my ex-fiancé. At that moment, everything in me broke down. When I stood up, my champagne glass was still in my hand, and the liquid inside it was trembling slightly, reflecting my inner storm. The eyes of my guests turned to me, some with curiosity, others with weariness, and others with obvious pleasure, anticipating the upcoming drama. Somewhere in the back of the room, Somione cleared his throat, cutlery clattered on plates, but otherwise there was a ringing silence, broken only by the pounding of my own heart. He took a deep breath, gripping the stem of the glass so tightly that the glass could burst at any moment. "You know what?" My voice sounded flat, but it seemed to me that it filled the whole hall, reflecting off the walls. "Let me tell you all a story." I felt Sanson squeeze my hand, his warmth penetrating my skin like a quiet but unshakable support. He didn't try to stop me, didn't try to whisper it's not worth it, didn't try to protect me from this battle, because he knew I'd been silent for too long. "Yes," I continued, looking at the faces of those present, "I love Sanson with all my heart. He's the best thing that's ever happened to me. He showed me what true love and the support look like." But I was already engaged a few years ago. We had an engagement party at my parents' house. I shifted my gaze to Chiara. She stood with her fingers clasped on her stomach, and for the first time that evening, something like uncertainty appeared in her eyes. Her smile faltered. It was then, I continued, that my dear sister, who was married at the time, decided that she needed to seduce my fiancé. A murmur swept through the hall. Someone's forks clattered on the plates. Someone's glass landed on the table with a thud. Chiara turned pale, and her hand instinctively shot out to Fons, but he didn't even look at her. Yes, my voice became more and more confident. She slept with him. In my house. In my room. On the very bed where I used to stay up late studying to pay for my tuition, because our parents only paid for her college. I watched as a shadow of realization crossed Fons' face, as his lips tightened into a thin line, as his hands clenched into fists. The interior was now looking at him and Chiara. Chiara tried to smile, but their voice faltered. Fons stood up so abruptly that his chair slid back, squeaking on the floor. His face was white, and his knuckles were white as he gripped at the edge of the table. Chiara froze like a hunted animal. "Fons, is that true?" he repeated, and his voice was already low, almost threatening. She swallowed, reached out to him, but he took a step back, and that was enough to bring tears to her eyes. "Yes, but, Fons, I can explain." But he wasn't listening anymore. He turned around and left the hall without saying another word. Chiara rushed after him, her pregnant belly making home comfortably as she desperately called his name. "Fons, Fons, bite." My parents jumped up after her. My mother's face was contorted with rage, carefully coiffed hair disheveled as she rushed towards me. Felisa. Her voice was full of indignation. Dare you? You've ruined everything. Why couldn't you just keep quiet like always? Why did you make a scene at your own wedding? I looked at her, and there was no anger or pain inside me anymore, just fatigue. No, Mom, he replied calmly. He didn't ruin anything. You ruined everything when you brought her here, even though I clearly said she wouldn't be there. You ruined everything when you chose her over me again. You ruined everything when you protected her after she betrayed me in the worst possible way. Mom parsed their lips, and their gaze filled with contempt, but he was no longer afraid of her anger. It's just the consequences of your choice, Mom. And now they finally caught up with you. She opened her mouth, but at that moment her father took her hand and said something softly. Their faces were flushed with humiliation as they turned around and followed Kiera and Fons out. For a moment, silence hung in the hall, tension thickened in the air. And then Sanson got up, reached out to me, and took my hand. Well, he said with a warm smile that touched his eyes, it seems we were in the middle of celebrating our wedding. Does anyone want to dance? Aunt Sarah clapped first, then Grandma Marta, then the Sanson family, and soon they all burst into applause. Linda, his mother, came over and hugged me tightly, whispering in my ear, I'm so proud of you, darling. You did the right thing. The aftermath of the scene unfolded felt like the echoes of an earthquake, but I was already watching them from a safe distance, sitting on a chaise longue in Hawaii, with a cocktail in my hand, enjoying my honeymoon with the Sanson. The real family gossip mostly came from Aunt Sarah and Grandma Marta. I found out about everything that happened after Kiera kicked Fons out of our party. Oh, quickly the sandcastles are falling down. Fons filed for divorce the following week. Kiera tried to stop him with all her might with tears, promises, playas, and even threats, but he wouldn't budge. It was inevitable, and it seems that deep down she understood it when her baby was born 2 months later. Fons wasted no time in demanding a paternity test. I wasn't surprised when the results confirmed what Kiera probably knew from the beginning. The baby wasn't his. Of course, he immediately withdrew any financial obligations. Thanks to their prenuptial agreement and their apparent betrayal, she left this marriage with nothing, no alimony, no house, no car, without all the privileges she was used to. All she has left are the clothes in her closet and a collection of expensive handbags that her mom and dad used to buy her. But the disasters of the golden child did not end there. As soon as our parents found out about the incident, they decided to sell their country house to pay for Kiera's legal fees. They easily sacrificed part of their wealth for her, just as they once sacrificed me when they turned a blind eye to her betrayal. Kiera and her newborn son returned to them, to the very house where we grew up. The irony of fate was that the girl, who always got everything on demand, was now sleeping in her old bedroom again, dependent on parental mercy, living off their retirement savings. Of course, in their eyes, it was all my fault. The first angry call came about a month after my wedding. You ruined your sister's life. Mom screamed into my voicemail. If you just kept your mouth shut, everything would have been fine. Her voice was full of anger, which I hadn't been afraid of in a long time. Dad didn't lag behind. You are no longer our daughter, he stated coldly in his message. We raised you better than that. I blocked their numbers, but they found new ways to contact me, letters, emails, through distant relatives, through mutual acquaintances. It was the summit everywhere. He was the villain of their story. The jealous older sister boy ruined the perfect life of poor, defenseless Kiera. But the problem was, he was no longer the Felisa who sought to earn their love. He no longer needed their approval. Now I had my own family, a real one. A family built not on manipulation and guilt, but on love and respect. A family where I was valued for who I am, not for who I had to become in order to meet other people's expectations. The Sanson family welcomed me with open arms. His mother Linda called every Sunday just to chat, to find out how we were doing, to recommend some new recipe. His sister became closer to me than Kiera ever was. Even his strict father Tom, A man who didn't waste emotions. Showed me in his own way that I was now a part of their family. He always left the biggest piece of his signature barbecue brisket for me at family dinners. One evening, when Sinsong and I were sitting on the couch, watching the sun sink into the scarlet clouds outside the windows of our house, he suddenly asked, "Do you know what's the best thing about marriage?" I smiled, snuggling closer to him. "What is it?" "The opportunity to choose your family," he said, kissing my forehead. "Blood doesn't always mean love, but love always means family." I took a deep breath, realizing how white he was. Grandma Marta still came to visit. She adored the Sinsone. "I always knew you'd find your way, Oni," she told me during my last visit. "Sometimes the hardest roads lead to the best places." I didn't know what happened to Kier after that, and he wasn't particularly interested. It was said that she was still living with her parents, that she was trying to rebuild their life. Sometimes he wondered if they would finally see her for who she was, or if they would continue to justify her actions. But it didn't bother me anymore. I had my own life now, my own family, my happiness, and it was better than any revenge. Write a comment on what you think about this story and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like it. See you soon.